Imagine being trapped inside a train in the middle of a forest for hours with no signal, rescue still far away, and something outside beginning to hunt everyone inside. The film begins by introducing a man named Joe, who works as a train conductor in London, England. Unfortunately for him, luck really does not seem to be on his side that night. Not only does Joe fail to get the supervisor promotion he has been hoping for, but he is also forced to take an extra shift to replace a sick coworker. As a result, he has to work on a late-night train heading to Eastbourne alongside a train attendant named Ellen and the train driver, John. As usual, once the train starts moving, Joe announces all the upcoming stops before reaching the final destination.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to remind you at this time to have your tickets ready for inspection. 2359 Alpha Track service to Eastborough.
After that, he begins checking the passengers' tickets one by one. However, the passengers quickly start testing his patience throughout the journey. From a dog suddenly startling him, to a woman named Kate panicking because she lost her ticket, and Nina, a rebellious teenage girl who acts rude and careless.
Tickets, please.
Oh, Christ.
Don't have a valid pass, I'm going to have to charge you the full fare.
Today's just been a complete nightmare. Heard it this morning.
That's going to be £39 then, please. Let's see your tickets, please.
We've got photos.
In the middle of his busy shift, Joe briefly asks Ellen if she wants to grab a drink together after work, but she immediately turns him down. As time passes, more and more passengers get off at their destinations, leaving the train to continue toward its final stop in Eastbourne. But as the rain grows heavier outside, the atmosphere suddenly changes when the train abruptly stops in the middle of the tracks. Just as Joe is about to head toward the driver's cabin to check the situation, John makes an announcement first, explaining that the train is experiencing technical problems and the trip will continue once everything is fixed. While the passengers begin questioning what is happening, Joe helps Ellen clean up the food trolley that was thrown into a mess by the sudden braking, with help from one of the passengers named Adrian.
Yeah, I'll do that. No, I'll do that.
Thanks.
Afterward, Joe checks on the other passengers, helps an elderly couple named Ged and Jenny gather their fallen groceries, and also deals with Kate complaining because her laptop suddenly stopped working after the incident. At the same time, without anyone noticing, John quietly leaves the train alone to investigate why they stopped. It turns out the train had hit a deer, leaving the carcass stuck on the tracks. But while checking the area in the middle of the dark forest, John suddenly hears a strange sound coming from deeper in the woods. Before he can even react, a horrifying figure standing on two legs suddenly emerges from the darkness and attacks him. From its appearance alone, it is obvious that the creature is far from an ordinary animal. Since John never comes back, Joe slowly begins feeling that something is seriously wrong. Even so, in order to keep the passengers calm, he asks Ellen to hand out snacks so panic does not spread through the train.
Maybe you should keep an eye on the passengers.
Joe also tries contacting the station through the radio to ask for help. Unfortunately, the terrible weather and fallen trees mean the rescue team will not arrive for at least another 4 hours. As soon as the passengers hear the news, tensions inside the train begin rising. Passengers like Kate, Nina, and Jenny grow increasingly frustrated, especially since nobody knows where John has disappeared to. In the middle of the panic, Adrian suggests what he believes are their only two options: either stay inside the train and wait for help, or walk along the railway tracks toward Eastbourne, which is estimated to be around 4 to 5 kilometers away. The second option quickly sounds more reasonable to some of the passengers, especially because none of them can call for help due to the complete lack of signal in the middle of the forest. It does not take long before most of the passengers agree to leave the train and walk toward the next station. However, Joe immediately objects because safety regulations strictly forbid passengers from leaving outside station areas. Sadly, the pressure from everyone keeps growing until Joe has no choice but to unlock the train doors and supervise them as they step outside.
I will lose my job, so I can't open the door. Stay on the train and wait assistance. Those are the rules, madam.
Well,
I can't leave the train.
It's stopped raining now.
please.
Come on.
Careful.
Perhaps you would, right?
I'll hold you up.
Keep on everything.
Please. There, I'll
At first, everything seems normal, but after walking only a few meters away from the train, everyone suddenly freezes after spotting a shadowy figure slowly moving behind the bushes.
Get there. You see your... Here.
What else? We're not just keep on going.
What do you mean?
Curious and concerned, Joe and Ellen move closer to investigate. What they discover instantly leaves both of them horrified. John's body is found in a gruesome condition, covered in severe wounds that clearly show he was attacked by something monstrous. Realizing the situation has now become a deadly threat, Joe and Ellen immediately order everyone to get back inside the train. But while they desperately retreat towards safety, the mysterious creature attacks again and manages to bite Jenny on the leg before everyone finally makes it back inside. The incident immediately throws the entire train into complete panic because nobody has any idea what kind of creature is hunting them in the middle of the forest that night. After making it back inside the train, Ellen and Joe immediately try to stop the bleeding from Jenny's leg after she was bitten by the mysterious creature. However, the wound keeps bleeding non-stop. The already terrifying situation grows even worse when Joe is about to lock the train door, only for something outside to suddenly slam violently against the side of the carriage. For a brief moment, the horrifying creature becomes visible through the window, revealing massive hands with sharp claws that clearly do not belong to any normal human being. Realizing that their situation is becoming more dangerous by the second, Joe quickly attempts to contact Eastbourne Station for emergency assistance. Unfortunately, the radio communication system, which is their only hope of getting help, is already broken and completely unusable. In the middle of the panic, one of the passengers named Billy, who has an engineering background, decides to inspect the control panel inside the driver's cabin. After checking the system, Billy concludes that the earlier collision most likely caused a fuel leak while also damaging several parts of the train's system, making it impossible for the train to continue moving anytime soon. With no other options left, Joe finally announces to all the passengers that they are forced to remain inside the train until help arrives. But instead of calming everyone down, the announcement only makes the atmosphere even more tense. The passengers begin questioning what kind of creature is waiting outside, especially after Jenny, who briefly saw the attacker, says that the creature looked far more human than animal. Her statement instantly makes everyone even more terrified, especially since Joe still refuses to tell them what really happened to John outside the train. Before anyone can calm down, a loud banging sound suddenly echoes from the rear carriage. Joe, Billy, and Adrian immediately rush toward the noise, which turns out to be coming from a shaking toilet door, as if someone is trapped inside. Once they open it, they discover a passenger named Tom, who has been hiding inside the toilet the entire time, without realizing how disastrous the situation outside has become. For a brief moment, things seem calm again, but the peace does not last long because the entire train suddenly starts shaking once more from violent impacts outside, while the lights begin flickering non-stop.
Dad, so I never noticed.
Where's it going? Just give her away. Just be quiet.
In the middle of the chaos, Nina's phone suddenly catches a signal and receives a call from her mother. Panicking, Nina tries explaining their situation and the location of the stranded train. However, before she can finish speaking, the mysterious creature suddenly smashes through the train window and brutally drags Nina outside right in front of the horrified passengers. The sudden attack throws everyone into complete panic, causing them to run toward the rear carriage. Adrian even uses his belt to tie the door shut so the creature cannot get inside. In the middle of the fear and confusion, several passengers begin blaming one another and slowly lose hope. However, Ged, the elderly man who has remained calm since the beginning, reminds everyone that the only way they can survive is by working together.
Shouldn't even be on this train. Enough! Do you all want to die tonight? We're sitting ducks here. If you still intend to get home, start acting like it.
Here, inside the train, the atmosphere remains just as tense when Kate reveals that she once applied for a job at Adrian's company. However, instead of paying attention to her qualifications or resume, Adrian spent the entire interview staring at her appearance, which ultimately led to Kate being rejected. The conversation unintentionally exposes Adrian's selfish personality even more clearly. Not long afterward, Matt suddenly hears Nina's voice calling for help from somewhere deep in the forest. Even though the situation is obviously dangerous, he still foolishly follows the voice, hoping Nina might still be alive.
Hello? Matt, what the fuck are you doing? Where are you? Where are you?
Unfortunately, the decision quickly turns into a fatal mistake. Once Matt reaches the location, he finds Nina's body in a horrifying condition. Before he even has a chance to escape, he realizes the creatures attacking them are not alone. Several werewolves suddenly emerge from the darkness and surround him from every direction until Matt eventually becomes their next victim. Matt's screams, followed by the loud howls of the werewolves, terrify everyone inside the train even more. Strangely, at the exact same moment, Jenny, who is still tied up, begins reacting in a disturbing way after hearing the howls. Her teeth slowly sharpen while her behavior turns more aggressive by the second. Outside, Billy's efforts finally pay off when the train engine successfully comes back to life. However, a new problem immediately appears because Billy cannot safely make it back inside the carriage. two werewolves are wandering dangerously close to him, forcing him to remain outside. At the same time, Joe and Ellen, who are inside the driver's cabin, suddenly panic after two creatures unexpectedly appear right in front of the train. Out of pure fear, Ellen accidentally pulls the control lever, causing the train to suddenly move forward again. As a result, Billy, who is still outside, has no choice but to cling underneath the moving train while desperately trying not to fall. Although he manages to hold on at first, Billy slowly begins losing his strength. As the train keeps moving, he realizes there is no way he can continue hanging there forever. With no other option left, Billy desperately removes the patch he had placed over the damaged fuel line earlier. He knows the fuel leak will return and force the train to stop again, but it is the only way he can survive. And, just as expected, shortly after the fuel begins leaking once more, the train gradually loses power before finally stopping in the middle of the forest again. But at the exact same time, the situation inside the carriage becomes even more chaotic. Jenny, who is now fully transformed into a werewolf, finally breaks free from her restraints and immediately attacks her own husband, Ged. In the middle of the panic, Kate uses the chaos as an opportunity to untie Adrian so they can both escape from Jenny. However, the situation only becomes worse when another werewolf suddenly breaks into the carriage. Since Kate is standing closest to the door, the creature instantly grabs her and drags her out of the train. Adrian briefly tries to hold on to Kate's hand, but because he is too terrified of losing his own life, he eventually lets go and abandons her to the werewolf. Meanwhile, Adrian finds himself trapped inside the same carriage as the fully transformed Jenny and slowly runs out of ways to survive. Jenny begins approaching him little by little, while Adrian can do nothing except wait helplessly since he has no weapon and nowhere left to escape. Fortunately, just before the situation turns fatal, the train, stopping once again, causes Joe and Ellen to head toward the rear carriage to investigate what happened. They arrive just in time and successfully kill Jenny before Adrian becomes her next victim. After everything that has happened, the number of survivors continues shrinking rapidly. At this point, only Joe, Ellen, Adrian, and Billy are still alive. Suddenly, two werewolves manage to break into the train from the rear carriage. Realizing they cannot survive much longer inside the train, Joe finally decides that their only option is to escape into the forest together with Ellen and Adrian. Unfortunately, just before they can carry out the plan, Adrian's true selfish nature appears once again. In order to save himself, he deliberately attacks Joe so the werewolves will focus on him instead, giving Adrian and Ellen enough time to escape. Joe does not stay silent and immediately fights back against Adrian. Seeing Adrian's selfish betrayal, Ellen quickly joins in to help Joe. However, in the middle of the chaos, Adrian manages to escape the carriage first and grabs the key still hanging near the door, leaving Joe and Ellen trapped inside without any way out. At the same time, distant howls begin echoing closer and closer as the werewolves slowly surround the area around the train. Just when the situation becomes completely hopeless, Billy suddenly appears and tries to distract the creatures by throwing a burning torch at them. Joe and Ellen immediately take advantage of the opportunity to force the door open using the crowbar Billy had given them earlier. Unfortunately, Billy's bravery comes at a terrible cost because he becomes the next target of the remaining werewolves and ultimately turns into another victim. The situation only grows worse from there. More howls begin echoing throughout the forest, revealing that the number of werewolves is far greater than anyone originally imagined. Realizing that their chances of survival are becoming smaller by the second, Joe finally makes one last decision. He chooses to become a distraction so Ellen has a chance to escape.
Ellen, run!
Joe, no, come on! No!
Not long afterward, a pack of werewolves arrives and completely surrounds the area. Joe continues fighting despite knowing there is almost no possibility he will survive. Eventually, he is overwhelmed by their numbers and attacked by the creatures, while Ellen uses the opportunity to run as far away from the nightmare as possible. After walking a great distance through the forest, Ellen finally manages to reach Eastbourne Station alive. Her appearance, covered in blood and wounds, immediately leaves everyone there confused and shocked, especially because Ellen is still clutching Joe's name badge in her hand. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, Adrian is still wandering alone after getting separated from everyone else. Exhausted and panicked, he suddenly hears strange rustling noises coming from nearby bushes. Shortly afterward, Adrian notices Joe's jacket lying on the ground. At first, he thinks Joe might still be alive, but as he moves closer, Adrian witnesses something horrifying with his own eyes. Joe is not dead after all. Instead, he has transformed into a werewolf because of the earlier attack. And without giving Adrian any chance to escape, Joe, who is no longer human, immediately pounces on him and sinks his teeth into him. And with that, the story comes to an end.